What's going on YouTube? It's Tej back again with another video, and today I'm regrading the 2019 NFL draft team by team. We did the 2018 draft. Today it's time to talk about this 2019 draft class, and hopefully you all enjoyed today's video. If you do, be sure to hit that like button. If you're new around here, want to see more football coverage in your life, be sure to hit that big red subscribe button as we get closer and closer to 1,000 subscribers. Thank you again, everybody, so much. And of course, join for a conversation down below in the comment section. What team do you think had the best 2019 draft? What team do you think maybe missed out on some big time prospects that now looking at the roster they could have used? And maybe who's your favorite team? What were some of your favorite picks, least favorite picks from this draft? Love to have your thoughts. I respond to just about every comment. So let's talk some football down below. Going over some of the criteria. I hit this a little bit in the 2018 video. Also want to know, do you want me to do 2020 and 2021 redraft or regrades of those drafts? I wasn't planning on it just because it feels like there's not enough of a sample to truly grade those draft classes. Maybe 2020, but give me your thoughts down below. But we're primarily talking about your top 100 picks, maybe your first four rounds worth of work, and prioritizing what have those players done to you or done for your team, and also have you kept them in house? Did you re-sign them to a second contract? Some of the things that we are looking for, and I am weighing if you got it right at the quarterback position, you're probably going to get an A, and if you got it right at wide receiver, corner, edge, those valuable positions, you are more likely to find yourself with a good grade. Let's go ahead and jump into it. And speaking of quarterbacks, this is going to be an A for Arizona. We'll kind of start with some of the the misses in there. Andy Isabella, that didn't work out. Hakeem Butler, that's been a disappointment. Even Keyshawn Johnson was somebody I thought maybe he could work himself into the mix. Didn't really happen. Zach Allen's been a capable player, but Kyler Murray and Cliff Kingsbury's rumoring or hinting that sounds like they're going to get that contract extension done. So they found their franchise quarterback, what you want to do with the number one overall pick, and they're going to re-sign him, it sounds like. So keeping your franchise guy in your franchise, that's always good. And then plus the bonus, first pick of the second round, Byron Murphy, who's really emerged as one of the best young cornerbacks in the league, especially playing that nickel spot. So got it right at quarterback. You're already talking about an A, but then throw in Byron Murphy. Yeah, this is a stellar draft, especially with those top two. You had to get those first two picks right. The rest of the way, it's kind of meh at best. But they got those first two picks right, so it's an A for Arizona. On to the Atlanta Falcons. Chris Lindstrom, Caleb McGarry, a couple offensive linemen there in the first round. Lindstrom, the returns have been good. McGarry, not so much. And then Kendall Sheffield was somebody who, and kind of talked about this with the Falcons draft in the 2018 video. I like Isaiah Oliver. I tend to like the prospects they bring in. It just doesn't always come together. And, there's not a whole lot to talk about the rest of the way. But Lindstrom's been solid. McGarry, not so much. I think I'll go C+ here. Lindstrom's been good, like I said, but this rest of this draft has not been what they had hoped for. Then we get to the Baltimore Ravens. This one's also a tricky one to grade because, look, Marquise Brown isn't on the team anymore, but they flipped him for a pick that was the 23rd overall pick. So they actually got a little bit of plus return on their investment. Jalen Ferguson was somebody I thought really would have been a nice addition to the defense, specifically under Wink Martindale's defensive coordinator leadership, but never really happened. Miles Boykin had some games. Ben Powers has played some for them as well. And then Justice Hill was, kind of a cog in the mix there in the running back room. But this is a team that gets value out of just about any running back that sees the field. So Marquise Brown, I think, gave this team, especially last year, that big playability. And, when he was consistently bringing in those deep passes in his direction, he was bringing about the big plays. So, especially last year, he did provide a lot of value. And plus, then you flip him for a first-round pick ahead of having to pay him. I think that's good business. The rest of the draft really isn't anything to write home about. I'll go with a B- here for the Ravens. That's a tough one to grade, but depends on how you gauge the Marquise Hollywood Brown situation. Moving on to the Bills, this is another tough one because Ed Oliver, Cody Ford have been disappointments, to say the least. Like Ed Oliver, you see the talent when you watch the Bills, but the production and the stats just aren't there. And then Cody Ford, they've had a hard time getting him on the field, and when he has seen the field, it has not been pretty. Devin Singletary feels like someone who's getting aged out after, they draft Zach Moss out of UAB, and then obviously this past year they drafted a second-round running back in James Cook, so it feels like his role is going to be really small. Dawson Knox is there, but how much of his role is gone now that O.J. Howard was just brought in during free agency? So this is, not necessarily the best draft under Brandon Beane, who I think is maybe the best GM in the NFL. This one just hasn't really come together. I think I got to go with a C- here for the Bills. There's a handful of starters in there and key contributors, but none of them have really lived up to their potential. Then we get to the Carolina Panthers, and I'm a huge Brian Burns fan. He was falling down this draft class. They got him right there in the middle of the first round. I think he's one of the best edge rushers in this draft class. Greg Little, that ultimately didn't work out, and Will Grier was this weird quarterback prospect because plays in this air raid. He has some gaudy throws on his tape coming out of West Virginia. It didn't pan out the NFL level. And not a whole lot to talk about, though, rounds 4 through 7. Brian Burns is the headliner here. He's a hell of a player to get in this spot. I'll go B+, but it's really only because of Brian Burns. For the Bears, I am taking into consideration no first or second round pick here. David Montgomery is a huge win. They're in the 3rd round. Riley Ridley, Kareth White, have seen the field. They have played, but nothing really crazy there. But you hit a home run really with David Montgomery there in the 3rd. That is a workhorse, top of the rotation running back there in Chicago. And he's going to see the ball a lot this year, especially considering it doesn't look like Justin Fields has a whole lot of people to throw it to. This is going to be a run-first offense in my eyes. So, Montgomery's a good value. You didn't have a first or second round pick to come away with a, Pro Bowl type of talent. I'd say that's a pretty good job. I'll go with a B here for Chicago. Then we get to the Bengals. Jonah Williams, he has been good, but now that this offensive line has, taken shape and they're maybe one interior offensive lineman away, you look at some of the parts and, Lyle Collins, Jonah Williams. Lyle Collins might be a better tackle. Granted, doing it on the right side, so there is a little bit of, you have to take that into consideration. Alex Kappa, guard tackle. It's comparing apples and oranges, but who's better for that position group? Williams has been solid. He's been stable, but now that you look at a pretty repaired Cincinnati Bengals line, it kind of shows that he's not great. He was the best that was already there. And Drew Sample, kind of a meh tight end. Jermaine Pratt does see the field for this team. Ryan Finley no longer with the team. Michael Jordan saw some playing time. He is no longer a Bengal either. And not a whole lot to talk about the rest of the way, but Jonah Williams is still starting left tackle, and that is a huge value. Even if they're average, having an average tackle that would make maybe $15 to $20 million on the open market, depending on who's handing out that check, to get them on a rookie contract and have them start pretty much as soon as they were healthy, that's a pretty sizable win there. And then Pratt sees the field pretty consistently, and Sample helped that a little bit. I'll go with the solid B. Could go B+, but I'll go with a B for the Bengals. Second in the AFC North, Greedy Williams really had some nice moments last year, and a little bit of a rotation is that number 2 outside corner, him and Greg Newsome. I think they both look pretty good. So that's a nice investment to have that much depth in the secondary there for Cleveland. And Sion Takitaki sees the field pretty reliably. Mack Wilson actually was just traded to New England, and they ultimately get Chase Winovich, another member of this draft class. We'll talk about him a little bit later on. I think that's actually a pretty solid trade. They'll get more out of Winovich than New England did. So taking that into a consideration, that I kind of feel a little bit better about giving a more favorable grade. Not that it's going to change it, but it makes me feel more, confident in giving the Browns a B here, because I think Greedy Williams is someone who's going to continue to get better, and you got to have depth on the outside. And then ultimately think of it as Chase Winovich. I think he's a nice DPR. Plus, Takitaki has seen the field. He's not great, but he's a reliable league average type of player. So you can throw him on the field, and he's not going to cost you a game. So I'll go with a B here. This was a solid draft class, especially considering no first-round pick. Then for the Cowboys, another team without a first-round pick. This one's a tougher grade here. Tristan Hill's, I don't want to call it a sneaky, but he might not make it out of camp. He might be a cut casualty there for Dallas and could save him a little bit of money. Connor McGovern, I think him and Connor Williams, both the Connors of the interior offensive line group, are like the bane of Dallas Cowboys fans' existence. So obviously not well received with his play, and I'm pretty sure that's a typo. That should say Tony Pollard, running back from Memphis, but actually sounds like they're using him a little bit more, or planning to use him a little bit more at slot wide receiver in the passing game, per Mike McCarthy, Kellen Moore, and some of the early reports from the Cowboys, organization. So that's intriguing, but he's been a really solid player. But as a running back, and because of you paying Zeke Elliott, you kind of shoehorned him into this specialist backup role. So kind of shot yourself in the foot there. And Donovan Wilson is a pretty solid safety. I'd say that's a good value there in the 6th round. But you really missed on those first 2 picks. You got a nice safety value, but he's really nothing super crazy. But just to get a league average player in the 6th round is good value. And then Tony Pollard's a really good player, but you shoehorned yourself into a spot where he has to be a backup, and he's a 4th round pick. And he's a running back. He's not all that valuable in and of itself. So I think I got to go with a D here for Dallas. I like Pollard, I like Wilson, but they're not bringing you a Super Bowl championship, and Tristan Hill, Connor McGovern have not worked out so far. For the Denver Broncos, this is a tricky one because Noah Fant, Drew Lock are part of the packages that ultimately get you Russell Wilson, but realistically, maybe Fant moves the needle a little bit, but the reason you're getting Russell Wilson is because Seattle's looking to start anew and those draft picks are valuable. So I'm not going to weigh them too heavily into this, but Noah Fant did provide some good play. I think Drew Lock process-wise was worth taking a stab in the dark. Pick 42. It didn't work out, but what if it did? Right? Then you're getting what the Eagles have in Jalen Hurts, this guy who can be, maybe league average, maybe a step above it, making less than $5 million a year or whatever on his cap. So that's a huge, huge, huge asset. It didn't work out with Locke, but it could have, and they could have had a Jalen Hurts type of advantage when it comes to managing their cap. Dalton Reisner's a solid player, and Draymond Jones is another guy that I like here too. So Fant was solid. I think the process around Locke was good. Reisner and Jones become capable players and a part of the starting lineup on both sides of the football. So I'll go with a B+ here for Denver. Not a bad draft in my eyes. For the Detroit Lions, another tight end that went in the first round, both coming from Iowa, actually. TJ Hawkinson, great first name if you ask me. He's been a Pro Bowl tight end, but drafting a tight end at 8, that's not a Kyle Pitts, this hybrid who can play outside wide receiver. A little bit of a tough sell. Jelani Tavai, an experiment that did not work out, unfortunately. Will Harris, he feels like one of those players that's better in his box score production than what he actually is in the field, but knows how to rake in some solid production and accumulates a lot of tackles. Austin Bryant, I was kind of hopeful that he could emerge and get better with the NFL level. Didn't really happen, unfortunately. Amani Oruwariye, though, that became a really nice selection there. You're talking about a guy with, 6 picks last year? Get him in the 5th round. And, especially given the uncertainty around Jeff Okudah, Oruwariye feels like he's got a pretty consistent path to the field as a starting boundary cornerback. So that's great value there in the 5th round. And Travis Fulgham gave you some moments. A lot of his shine came with Philadelphia, actually. But nonetheless, to get him in the 6th round, I think is pretty solid. And actually know somebody who played alongside him at ODU. So maybe a little biased there. But Hawkinson's been solid. Harris, you can play. Oruwariye really feels like maybe the best value they got out of this draft class. Maybe not even maybe. Probably the best value they got out of this draft class. I'll go with a B-. Tavai was a pretty sizable miss, picking early in the 2nd round. So there's some good that came out of this class, but nothing that was star heavy. So I'll go with a B- for Detroit. Sticking with the NFC North, Green Bay Packers, Rashawn Gary, Darnell Savage. I mean, you hit on premier edge. Now he's likely seen as the best edge rusher on that team. And then Darnell Savage, they're gonna probably have to pay him. And they're going to pay him a hefty load because that dude is a playmaker and he's emerged as one of the best safeties in the game. So that, and then how about we go 3 for 3 with these first picks? Elton Jenkins has emerged as, maybe one of the best guards in football, maybe one of the best tackles. He can do both, and that one's so valuable to have one of the best players at any one of those positions, but have a guy who can do a little bit of both. That is massive. This is an A draft without a doubt for Green Bay, and I actually gave him an A in the 2018 video as well. So kind of wild, give a ton of credit. Brian Gutekunst, he may not be a perfect GM, and he might have mishandled that Aaron Rodgers relationship a little bit last summer, but things seem to be a little bit better. He might have, messed up the Devontae Adams situation in turn, but ultimately, the way he's drafted, he's been able to maintain a high level of talent on that roster. And Rashawn Gary, Darnell Savage, Elton Jenkins, that's 3 for 3 on your first 3 picks. And, Jay Sternberger is fine. He's just a tight end. They don't really draft tight ends all that well, but those first 3 are huge parts to why they're potential Super Bowl contenders. So yeah, it's got to be an A for the Packers. For the Houston Texans, Titus Howard was a controversial pick at the time, but especially getting to see him play a little bit of tackle last year, I'm thinking that there's still some room to grow, and I think, if he takes another step forward, you're looking at a solid right tackle. Laramie Tunsil's one of the better left tackles in the league. You got your bookend tackle situation, plus you draft Kenyon Green at 15. You're feeling pretty good about that offensive line, so some growing pains early on, but I think Titus Howard showed that he could stick specifically at tackle towards the latter half of last year. Lonnie Johnson was a prospect I was pretty excited about, and I thought they could develop. That didn't ultimately end up happening. Max Sharping has been someone who's seen the field. Charles Omenihu, pretty solid value there in the 5th round, so that's a solid pick. Not a whole lot's come to fruition yet, other than maybe Omenihu, but still something I think to work with. I'll go with a C for right now, but that's definitely a grade that could change in a year's time, depending on what Howard and Omenihu continue to grow into. For the Colts, super weird one. Rock Ya-Sin, he was fine. Obviously, he's a part of the trade where you get Yannick Ngakoue in return, but I never really got a ton of the hate that he got. This FCS player coming out of Presbyterian, transfers to Temple. He wasn't great. I get that. Maybe not the best pick or player you could have gotten there at 34, but he started for you. You got production out of him, and especially playing a lot of that, Matt Eberflus cover 2. He's physical. He can play that flat zone and make plays in the running game, so I think he fit for what that defense was trying to be. And then Ben Banaga, that hasn't really worked out. Paris Campbell, has had moments, but he can't stay healthy. But so you look at those first 3 picks and you're like, okay, well, that's kind of a tough start there for Indianapolis. Basically the complete opposite of what we talked about with Green Bay. But then Bobby Okereke, which I know it used to be Okereke, but Okereke is what apparently wants to go by now, which that's great. Him alongside Darius Leonard has made for one of the best, linebacker duos in the game. Okay, that's a win. Khari Willis, from the second he was drafted, became an impact player in that secondary. And talking about Im Blackman, I mean, that's one of the best safety duos in the NFL. And then, Marvin Tell, nothing crazy there. And, you get into the 6th and 7th round selections. Nothing too wild. But Okereke and Willis, especially considering they still have a huge role in that defense from the back 7, man, it's tough to not tank this grade. I'm going to go with a B- because you look at those picks and, yeah, they got solid value with Okereke and Willis. But if they hit on one of those first 3, then you're talking about this being another A-level draft for Chris Ballard. But he missed on, you could call it a miss on Rocky Sin and company. And maybe Paris Campbell able to stay healthy and can turn this grade in a higher one in a year's time. But really, what saves this grade for the Colts is Okereke and Willis. For the Jags, Josh Allen's been a really nice player. He's kind of unfortunately been dealt the tough card, considering Jacksonville, from this point when he got drafted onward, been kind of the laughing stock of the league. Jawan Taylor has been a disappointment there as a right tackle. Josh Oliver never really did a whole lot for the organization. Gardner Minshew, though, birth of an absolute legend, and just a meme god in and of himself, and actually did play pretty well, especially that first year in Jacksonville. So I think they did the right pick. I think they had the right selection with Josh Allen there at 7. He has become one of the better young pass rushers in the league. Waiting to have him take that next step forward towards superstardom. Maybe now with another edge rusher there in the mix and Travon Walker, who has some better help compared to not having a whole lot with Caleb on Chase on not panning out. This one's a tough one to grade because Taylor has been a huge disappointment. Oliver was kind of a wasted asset there as a 3rd rounder. Minshew was a backup quarterback when they drafted him, and that's really all he should be. I'll go with a B-. You did yourself well by Josh Allen, but not a whole lot else to write home about. For the Kansas City Chiefs, Mecole Hardman, they found ways to get production out of him, but he has been a disappointment. Really, he was kind of a knee-jerk selection because, Tyreek Hill is going to be suspended. We had to replace that speed. And, he can change this grade a ton this year. If he really steps in and becomes a true Tyreek Hill replacement, considering he's not on the roster anymore, I will change this grade in a heartbeat. But Juan Thornhill, I think, is a pretty good selection. They got him at a good value there towards the end of the 2nd round, a rangy free safety, and allows them to move when they had Tyrann Mathieu, of course, at the time. They can move him around all over the field, and same thing with Dan Sorensen. They can make him into a dime backer, essentially. So Juan Thornhill gave that defense a lot of flexibility. I think he's a good young player as well. And then Rashad Fenton, you draft a starting quarterback in the 6th round, and he has found a way to not be, an embarrassment out there. He has been, league average, fitting inside that Steve Spagnuolo defense, and he's been what they've asked him to be. And Darwin Thompson, once upon a time, a fantasy, dynasty darling, draft and stash prospect. That hasn't really happened, but that name always makes me think about that. But Fenton, you draft a starter, that's solid. Good pick there with Juan Thornhill in the 2nd, and Hardman hasn't been great, but they found a way to get production out of him. I'll go with a B for Kansas City. That takes us to the Chargers. Jerry Tillery was one of the big 1st-round misses from this year's draft class. And then Nasir Adderley, not great. Trey Pipkins hasn't worked out yet. They do like Drew Tranquill, and he'll have a huge opportunity as the inside linebacker position for this Chargers team remains to be one of their biggest holes, but that kind of is a product of the Brandon Staley philosophy. So he'll have an opportunity to prove himself this year and really change this grade. But otherwise, maybe D+. Nasir Adderley isn't all that bad, but he hasn't been anything really special either. So 2nd round pick, that is a premium selection, and he's battled injuries, hasn't been everything they wanted him to be. So Tillery's been a disappointment. Adderley, I think you could put in the disappointment category. Tranquill, there's something maybe there, but I think you got to go D+ here for LA. On to the other LA team, the Rams. I was a huge Taylor Rapp guy coming out of Washington, so I am a little biased here. I thought that was a great selection back in the 2nd round. When he's healthy, I think there is still something to tap into there. Darrell Henderson has seen the field. He's been a productive running back, but he's been definitely a part of a committee, whether it was Sony Michel, whether it's Cam Akers. He's always been a cog in the mix as opposed to the workhorse guy. David Long, Bobby Evans, Greg Gaines actually had some big games last year, and he might buoy this, this grade up a little bit. David Edwards and then Dakota Allen, last chance U star right there in the 7th round. But Gaines giving you solid play, Henderson being a part of the mix, and then Rapp ideally when he's healthy being a capable starter on the back end. No 1st round pick. I'll go with a B- here for the Rams. No superstars, but key contributors, and that's really what this team needs out of the draft, considering how much they spend on superstar talent with Aaron Donald, Jalen Ramsey, Matt Stafford, you know the story, Cooper Kupp, et cetera, et cetera. For the Miami Dolphins, Christian Wilkins has emerged as one of the better young defensive tackles in the league, and maybe if you're drafting an under 25 team, he might be the guy you would take to fill that position for you at the defensive tackle spot. Michael Dieter hasn't been great. That's been disappointing. Andrew Van Ginkel's had some moments and some success. That was really under the Brian Flores, and that's a very Bill Belichick. I want a hybrid linebacker where you can drop into coverage. You can also rush the passer. He had some success with the Flores. It'd be interesting to see what it looks like under, maybe a similar look, but obviously a differently coached defense there in Miami now. And Isaiah Prince, Chandler Cox, Myles Gaskin, actually, I think for a 7th round pick, they've gotten pretty decent value to that. But there is a reason they go out there and they sign a Raheem Mostert and they bring in a Chase Edmonds. It's because they thought they could get better at that position. So Wilkins, definitely a big hit. Decent moments from Van Ginkel. I don't know what his long-term value with that organization is going to be, but hit on Wilkins. I'll go with a solid B here for Miami. And that takes us to the Minnesota Vikings. Garrett Bradbury has been a little disappointing. Gotten some high praise early on from Kevin O'Connell, that new coaching staff, and he does feel like a nice scheme fit if they're going to keep that wide zone. But that was kind of already what they were playing, and maybe he's okay as a run blocker, but the pass protection has been a huge issue, especially in that division where you see Kenny Clark twice a year. That's caused some headaches for Minnesota fans, I know. Irv Smith Jr., I've always been excited what he could be, but having him on the field has been a huge issue. And then also at the beginning of his career, a lot of those opportunities, especially in the red zone, were going to Kyle Rudolph, and he was a red zone monster, so you can't knock the Vikings there. Alexander Mattison, really nice backup running back, but he's a backup running back that you took, just outside the top 100. And then, Cameron Smith, Armand Watts, Marcus Epps, lots of shots towards, the end of the NFL draft. Rick Spielman, I think he did a lot of things right, and I can understand wanting to trade down, get more picks, but you're talking about, 3 6s and 4 7s? That's a little too much prioritization on taking quantity over quality. Really, if you're going to be picking on day 3, you want to load up on, the 4th round picks like we saw the Ravens pick 4 times in the 4th round this past year. That's really where you want to be doing it, 6 and 7s, and a lot of those 6 and 7s kind of went by the wayside pretty quickly for Minnesota. So Bradbury's a miss. Irv Smith Jr. is unable to stay healthy. Alexander Madison's a nice backup, but he is a backup, and then not a lot else to talk about the rest of the draft. So sorry, Minnesota, but this has got to be, a D- type of draft. I'll go with a D with the hope that Bradbury can get better under Kevin O'Connell, but right now it's looking like a D for Minnesota. On to the New England Patriots. They take N'Keal Harry. This is the infamous N'Keal Harry draft, which obviously a huge L there. Joe Juwan Williams, don't really hear him taking the field a whole lot for the Patriots, so another sizable L there. Chase Winovich, obviously that becomes, Mack Wilson via this offseason's trade between the Patriots and the Browns, but I think Winovich, getting away from Bill Belichick and having to play that hybrid linebacker role we were just talking about with Miami and Van Ginkel, I think that might serve him well, just make him hand in the dirt, 4-3 edge rusher for Cleveland. I think he might be better. And I think Mack Wilson is kind of a linebacker that New England hasn't had for a little bit. These smaller but more athletic, more coverage-based linebackers. So I feel like it is a trade that worked out pretty well for both sides. And they're not superstars, but they're players who can provide a skill set that wasn't there before. So, think of that as Mack Wilson basically as your 3rd round pick, if you want to look at it that way. And then Damian Harris, I think is, I'm a huge Damian Harris guy when he's not turning the football over and he was keeping a tight grip on it, not fumbling it away. Big fan of Damian Harris, especially in that offense and, how they beefed up that offensive line. Thought he would have a ton of success. He was one of my breakout candidates heading into last season. I think he broke out, again, aside from some fumble issues. And, Jared Stidham, they always draft a backup quarterback, it seems like. And then, not a lot else to talk about. So, this is a disappointing draft class for sure. Buoyed by Damian Harris, but it's a running back. And then, Chase Winovich, you ultimately trade him for Mack Wilson. So whatever you think about Mack Wilson, how that might elevate this grade, it's really not going to be all that much. I got to go D+ here for New England. Honestly, this might be... Looking back at this in Minnesota, they're neck and neck. I'll go with a D here for the New England Patriots to keep it consistent between them and the Vikings, but a couple of tough drafts there back to back. That takes us to the Saints. Eric McCoy, really beyond solid selection there, especially in the middle of the 2nd round. Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, really fun player, one of the best trash talkers in the league as well. Get him in the 4th round. That's a win. Those first 2 picks, you only have 5, and considering it's a 2nd and 4th round pick that you hit on, I think I got to go... I'll go with a B+ here. Maybe if they had more selections in here, I could get it up in the A category. But value-wise, this is a stellar draft put together by Mickey Loomis. On to the Giants. Daniel Jones obviously has not worked out, and taking him at number 6, that's been a disappointment. But Dexter Lawrence has gotten better with time, and that's a solid selection. But he was really the only one of those 3 first-round picks that hit as DeAndre Baker doesn't play on the team anymore, and pretty soon after getting drafted was having some off-the-field issues. That's disappointing. O'Shane Ximines, intriguing prospect as an edge rusher coming from a smaller school, hasn't worked out yet. Julian Love, kind of this nickel corners, box safety type, been on the field, been solid, but nothing above average or anything like that. He's just kind of a league player. And then Darius Slayton's another headline player, but he was somebody who kind of captured headlines towards the end of the regular season during his rookie campaign and had some moments and flashes. Hasn't really gotten back to that level yet. He'll have some big games. He can create some big plays. He's a nice cog in the mix, but to me, he's nothing more than a deep threat element inside of a wide receiver room. He's not a 1. He's not a 1B or anything like that. So solid player, good player to have on your roster. Dexter Lawrence feels like it's working out, but 1 for 3 on those first round picks, and then Slayton's about the only other above average player you got. And I don't even really think of Slayton as above average. He's just a nice deep threat. He is an average player with a nice complement skill set for a wide receiver room because of that downfield speed. I'm rambling here. Maybe a C here for the Giants. That's tough. Yeah, I mean, Lawrence is good, like Slayton. We're taking the risk on the Eli Manning replacement with Daniel Jones, but it hasn't worked out. I guess a C here for the Giants, and that even feels kind of nice. On to the other New York team, the New York Jets. Obviously, the Bills, talked about them already. But for the Jets, Quinnen Williams hasn't fully lived up that potential. He's still good, but I don't know about top 3 pick in the draft, so that's a little disappointing for Jets fans. Ja'Kai Polite, what a fall from grace. He didn't last long in the NFL, and then Blake Cashman might be the only other name on that list that more than 50% of NFL fans might recognize. So I like Quinnen Williams. I'll go C- though. I mean, because after Williams, this was a bad draft for the Jets. Then for the Raiders, I mean, another team with 3 first-round picks, and none of them had their 5th-year option picked up. I mean, we're starting on F grade right there. Like, you might like Clelin Ferrell, but he's nothing more than a rotational edge, primarily because he can stop the run pretty well. That's where a lot of his value comes from. Josh Jacobs, he's a running back, and he's also battled a ton of injuries. The wear and tear is starting to catch up, and Jonathan Abrams, a box safety, should not have been a first-round pick because that is a very, end of day 2, beginning of day 3 at best type of skill set that you would want to, where the value matches up best to the draft. So taking him in the first round is disappointing. But then you look at these, next couple of picks. Trayvon Mullen right now might be the best cornerback on that roster. Max Crosby's a all-pro type of edge, so that's a huge win. So you start out 0 for 3, and the next 2 picks kind of buoy this back up towards like, okay, well, I was thinking F, maybe this is a B, and then couple rounds later, Foster Moreau, nice tight end, especially if you're going to use Darren Waller more as a wide receiver, which maybe we'll see that more this year. He can plug in and be that inline tight end. He's a solid one at that. And then Hunter Renfrow has emerged as maybe the best slot wide receiver in the league. Well, maybe not the best. Teams can be weird about where they use wide receiver. I don't want to say it's weird, but anyways, without getting into it, Devontae Adams lives in the slot. Cooper Kupp does a lot too. Maybe the best pure slot wide receiver, the guy who really fills that archetype, and like Adams and Kupp, they can play outside. You're not really going to ask Hunter Renfrow to do that. So solely a slot wide receiver. Say that 5 times fast. He has become one of the best of those types of players inside the NFL. So really rough first round, but for the next 5 picks are big reasons why you're playoff competitive right now. Especially Max Crosby has become one of the best edge rushers in football. So despite that first round, I'm going to give this, I think you got to give it a B+ because of how good Crosby's been. So I'll go B+. Man, if one of those first rounders would have hit, this is easily an A draft for then Oakland, now the Vegas Raiders. For the Philadelphia Eagles, Andre Dillard has been a disappointment. I still think there's some value in potentially trading him, trying to get one of those picks back. So hopefully the Eagles do something like that. Miles Sanders is a good, solid player. They got him in the 2nd round. I think that's a good value there. Maybe a little early depending on where you sit on the running back value debate, but he's been good when he's healthy and provide pass catch value too. So I think it's more than just what he brings as a runner. JJ Arcega-Whiteside before DK Metcalf and AJ Brown. Yeah, that's I know. I'm not gonna bury Eagles fans there, but that's obviously tough. Nothing to really talk about there with the 4th and 5th round selection. Dillard disappointment, Arcega-Whiteside disappointment, and then Sanders has been a solid running back. C at best. I'll go with a C here for the Eagles because Sanders is solid, but a couple of big misses there, and 2 of your first 3 picks coming in the first 2 rounds. On to the Pittsburgh Steelers. This was the year Pittsburgh traded up to get Devin Bush at pick 10. When he's on the field and healthy, he's okay. He's solid, and you also have to think about the context of this was pretty much when it was known that Ryan Shazier was never going to play football again. So I think the onus was there for Pittsburgh, like, hey, Ryan Shazier's a huge loss. How do we lose that? Let's go get this freak linebacker from Michigan. And maybe because of that, they paid a little steep of a price to move up from 20 to 10 to draft an off-ball linebacker. So that's kind of tough. And then plus his injuries, haven't really gotten the full value out of your first-round pick that year. But Deontay Johnson, the third round, he may not be at camp right now. Depending on his contract demands, give him the money. But Deontay Johnson has kind of emerged as maybe the best wide receiver on the roster right now. Justin Lane was somebody I was super hyped up on. This big, tall, long cornerback coming to Michigan State. Has not worked, unfortunately. And then Sutton Smith, Zach Gentry, kind of just names on the roster. Benny Snell, I don't think it's on the roster anymore. So, disappointing draft. Deontay Johnson's a big hit there. And when Bush has played, he's been solid. I'll go B-, mainly because of what Johnson has been, especially over the last year or so when he's not dropping the football. He's been a really impactful player on the outside. Excited to see what he could do in an offense that's not seeing him have to get open within 2 seconds. Let a play grow and see what he can do, especially down the field. And then Devin Bush, when he's out there, is good. Just not maybe a top 10 caliber player in this draft class, and also battles a ton of injuries. Next up, the 49ers, Nick Bosa. I mean, he might be the best of the Bosa brothers, depends on who you ask, but Nick Bosa obviously hit there at number 2. Deebo Samuel, the top of the second round, who's become one of the best playmakers in football. Pay that man. He can do it both in the passing game, but also in the running game. Maybe he doesn't want to do that as much, but I still think there's some value in having that role at least a little bit there and open for that. Jalen Hurd didn't really necessarily work out. Mitch Wiskowski, he's a punter, whatever. And then Drake Greenlaw in the 5th round, another notable name there and a reliable starter for them. And I think he's been a pretty good player at that. So get him in the 5th round. That's a win. This is an A draft. You hit an edge, wide receiver, and you got a great value in Drake Greenlaw. What more could you ask for? Bosa, Samuel in specific, they are the cornerstones on that roster right now. And then we'll see what Trey Lance kind of grows into. He might be the next one in that mix. George Kittle, of course, as well. But, huge addition to the roster there in the 2019 draft for San Francisco. Next up, the Seahawks. LJ Collier, that's been disappointing. Marquise Blair, he's not a starting safety. So, obviously that didn't work out. DK Metcalf, though. I mean, that's the big hit in this draft class. Travis Homer gave you some moments and, filled in a little bit last year. But DK Metcalf is the headline jewel, and he plays that valuable position at wide receiver. He's your alpha. He's your number 1, and I think they should pay him because extend him now, give him a 5-year contract. He'll be 29 by the end of it. You're still getting his prime. I think you can rebuild the Seattle Seahawks roster within 2 years' time. So I think they extend him, and if they do, it makes this grade feel that much more confident. But lots of misses outside of Metcalf. I'll go with a B-. It's hard not to give it something with a B because of DK Metcalf, but a B- because everything else around him is rough for this draft class. For the Bucs, I mean, this Jason Light continues to be one of the best drafting, GMs in the league, and 2019 is a great case in point. Yeah, maybe Devin White taking an off-ball linebacker at 5. He's kind of a headhunter, downhill linebacker, not great in coverage to get picked on there. But man, when it comes to making plays, being a playmaker, lack of word choice there, but he knows he's got a nose for the football, and he racks up tackles. And when it comes down to being a downhill linebacker, attack the line of scrimmage, find ball carrier, make play, he does it at a high level. So you got to give him some chops there and some props there. Sean Murphy-Bunting, become one of the best nickel cornerbacks in football. Jamel Dean, especially filling in as the number 1 corner last year when Davis and Murphy-Bunting got hurt pretty early on last year. He has exceeded his value there in the 3rd round. And he's another player. They're going to have to try to figure out that contract. They'd love to be able to keep him around. And then Mike Edwards, get him just before pick 100. He's been a consistent starter and role player for this team. And then you get Scotty Miller in the 6th. Matt Gay might not have worked out in the 5th, but worth taking a shot in the kicker there. And then, like I said, Scotty Miller, maybe not an alpha wide receiver, but if he's your 4, you're feeling pretty good about that. You got him in the 6th round. I think that's solid return on your investment there. This is an A draft for Tampa Bay. Same thing I gave him in the last video. Then to the Tennessee Titans, Jeffrey Simmons, A.J. Brown. What do you want me to say? That should be an A. It should be an A. But then they moved on from A.J. Brown. They had the chance to keep him in town for 4 more years, and they squandered that opportunity. But it does get better. David Long Jr., that's good value there in the 6th round. And Amani Hooker, really, really good player, and they got him in the 4th round. So that definitely puts the grade back up. Nate Davis has been a little bit of a disappointment, but still younger player. Maybe he'll take a step forward this upcoming season. He's going to be starting, it looks like. So he'll have the opportunity in front of him. But Simmons emerging as one of the best, defensive tackles by itself in the game, especially when you consider his age. Awesome selection there. Amani Hooker, reliable starter. I think I got to go B+ here. Because, even though they moved on from A.J. Brown, he was so good for them. And they got him in the middle of the 2nd round. So I'll go B+. This should be an A+, though, if they still had A.J. Brown. Then, final team we'll talk about, the Washington Commanders. Rest in peace, Dwayne Haskins. I know his NFL career did not work out, but to see somebody pass away that young, that is obviously really, really sad. So rest in peace, Dwayne Haskins. Excuse me, I cannot say his name. Dwayne Haskins. But, from that point onward, Montez Sweat. With a 26th pick, yeah, you'll take that every time. And then Terry McLaurin in the middle of the third. Pay that man. He deserves his money. He's had to do so much with so little when it comes to the quarterback position. Pay that man. He totally deserves it. Awesome value. Maybe the steal of this draft, considering you got him in the third. And then a little bit lower down, Cole Holcomb, reliable starter, league average player. You can feel comfortable having him out there. Kelvin Harmon hasn't really worked out, but he provides some size. And then Jimmy Moore was kind of an interesting prospect coming from James Madison, small school. Didn't really work out. It's a 7th round flyer. Doesn't really matter. But Sweat, McLaurin, and then solid player in Holcomb. Dare I say, despite missing at the quarterback, this is a B+ draft in my eyes for Washington because they got a high-value edge. And then you compare that plus Chase Young, who they get in the next draft. Awesome pass rush duo. Terry McLaurin really getting a number 1 clear-cut alpha wide receiver in the 3rd round. Huge value. And then Cole Holcomb, solid starter to get them in the 5th. You like that as well. So I'll go with a B+ for the Washington Commanders. But that is going to do it for today's video. That has been my regrading of the 2019 NFL Draft. Tell me what you think down below in the comment section. You think I was too harsh to a certain team, too kind to another? Who do you think won this draft, and who do you think was the overall loser? Love to have your thoughts. I'll respond to just about any comment down below, so let's talk some football down in the comment section. Hopefully you all enjoyed today's video. If you did, be sure to hit that like button and help me out a ton. If you're new around here, be sure to hit that big red subscribe button. Help us get closer and closer to 1,000 subscribers. That's going to do it for me. Until next time, my name is Tej, and I am signing off.